My daughter-in-law told the valet my coat wasn't worth parking for, and had the doorman move my car to the street. My son watched her do it and said nothing. 20 minutes later, I was still standing in that driveway when a car pulled up that made the entire family go silent because the man getting out of it owed me his life. Welcome back, and thank you for spending this evening with me. Before I start, tell me where you're watching from tonight. I read every single comment, every one of them, and I want you to know something up front. Some names and details in this story have been changed. Some moments are shaped the way memory shapes things. Softened here, sharpened there, but what's underneath it is true, and I think you'll feel that as we go. I'm 71 years old, and if there's one thing 7 decades teaches a man, it's that the people who love you the least are usually the ones who talk about family the most. I learned that lesson late. I learned it the hard way, and I learned it on a Saturday evening in June that I will never, as long as I have breath in me, be able to forget. My name is Frank Delgado. For 38 years, I ran a small fleet of tow trucks and a salvage yard on the edge of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Delgado Recovery. 3 trucks when I started, 11 when I sold it. It wasn't glamorous work. I came home most nights smelling like diesel and rust. My knuckles split from chains and winches. And I built that business 1 impounded car and 1 3M highway call at a time. My wife Rosa used to say I loved that yard more than I loved sleep, and she wasn't entirely wrong. I retired 4 years ago, not because the work wore me down, the work never wore me down, but because Rosa's heart started giving her trouble, and she asked me, plain as anything, to be home with her. I was home with her for 14 months. Then one October morning she didn't wake up, and the house on Comanche Street has been quieter than any silence I've ever known ever since. I tell you all this, not to make you feel sorry for an old man. I tell you this because you need to understand who I was walking in that door as, on the night everything changed. A man who built something out of nothing. A man who never once, in 38 years, failed to keep his word to a customer or a bank. A man whose only son had, somewhere along the way, started looking at him like an inconvenience he hadn't finished apologizing for. My son's name is Marcus. He's 34 now, sharp as a tack, works in commercial real estate development, and he married a woman named Vivian 6 years ago who I have never once, not on my life, seen without makeup applied like armor and a smile that never once reached past her teeth. I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because it's the truest thing I know about her. The call came on a Tuesday. Marcus doesn't call to talk. Not anymore, he calls when there's a reason. And I've learned to brace myself the second I see his name light up my phone. "Dad," he said, and his voice had that too bright quality it gets when he's rehearsed something. "Vivian and I are hosting an engagement dinner. Her sister's getting married. Big deal. Lots of important people coming, some of Vivian's father's business contacts, some of my clients. We want you there. Now, understand something. The last time I'd been invited to anything at Marcus and Vivian's house was 2 Christmases ago, and I'd spent most of that evening standing near the coat closet while Vivian introduced me to her friends as Marcus's father. He used to do something with cars, the way you'd describe a hobby a person had grown out of. I hadn't seen my son in 5 months. Not a lunch, not a phone call that wasn't about something he needed. And here he was, inviting me to stand in a room full of his wife's important people. Something in my chest did that thing it does, half hope, half old scar tissue, remembering exactly how much a scar can still ache when the weather turns. I said yes. Of course I said yes. He's my son. A man doesn't stop being a father just because his son forgets, sometimes, how to be one back. "Saturday, 6 o'clock, he told me. "I'll text you the address, Dad." "I know the address, Marcus," I said. "I know exactly where you live." "Right," he said. "Right, of course." That week I did something I hadn't done in longer than I care to admit. I went shopping for myself. Not for the yard, not for a funeral. For myself. I still have the navy sport coat I wore to Rosa's sister's wedding 15 years back. Good wool. Held its shape. But I wanted something for Marcus. A gift. Something that said I was trying. The way a man tries when he doesn't have the words for trying out loud. I found a leather-bound photo album at a shop downtown and spent 2 evenings going through boxes in the garage, pulling out pictures Marcus at 6 on my shoulders at the state fair, Marcus at 16, leaning against his first car, a rusted-out Nova we rebuilt together one whole summer, grease under both our fingernails, Him laughing at something I don't even remember anymore. I put 30 years of my son's life into that album, page by page, and on the last page I put a photo of Rosa holding him as a newborn, because I wanted him to remember, whatever else had grown between us, that he came from people who loved him before he'd done a single thing to earn it. I wore my good coat that Saturday, a charcoal wool overcoat, 30 years old if it was a day, the kind of coat you buy once in your life, because it's built to outlast you. I'd had it cleaned and pressed that week special. Rosa always said I looked like somebody in that coat, somebody who mattered. I drove myself. Nobody offered to pick me up. I left Tulsa's east side at 4:30 to give myself time, because at 71, my knees have opinions about long drives now, and because a man walking into uncertain water should arrive calm, that was something my own father used to say, and it stayed with me 60 years. Marcus and Vivian live out in a development called Rivercrest Estates, the kind of neighborhood where the lawns look painted on and every house has a name instead of just a number. I'd been there 4 times in 6 years. I parked at the end of a long circular driveway already crowded with cars I couldn't have afforded 10 of in my whole working life. A Bentley, 2 Range Rovers, something low and black that looked like it was born angry. I sat in my truck for a minute with the photo album on the passenger seat, my hand resting on the leather cover. "You'd have liked this coat, Rosa," I said out loud, the way I still talk to her sometimes when there's nobody around to think it's strange. "Let's see what tonight is." There was a young man in a red vest at the top of the driveway, a valet, taking keys, waving cars toward a lot around back. I climbed out of my truck, straightened my coat, and picked up the album. And that's when Vivian came down the front steps to greet the arriving guests. Champagne-colored dress, dark hair pinned up like she'd hired someone just for that. Her eyes found me the way a hawk finds movement in tall grass, quick, assessing, already calculating. They went from my face to my old truck parked in that driveway full of luxury cars, and something behind her smile went cold and hard for exactly 1 second before the smile itself widened. "Frank," she said, like my name was a mild inconvenience she'd remembered to prepare for. "You made it." I said I would. She turned to the valet without missing a beat. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice pitched low but not low enough, "could you move that truck around to the street? We don't really have anywhere to put it." "And your coat, Frank?" She looked me up and down. Slow, deliberate. "We've got quite a formal crowd tonight. I hope you're not too warm in all that wool." I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my voice level, the voice I'd used for 38 years negotiating with insurance adjusters who wanted to shortchange me on a claim. "It's a nice evening for it," I said. She smiled that smile again, the one that never once made it to her eyes, and gestured me inside with a sweep of her hand that somehow felt like being shooed. Inside, the house was blazing with light and noise. 60, maybe 70 people in cocktail dresses and tailored suits. A jazz trio set up near the back windows, servers moving trays of champagne through the crowd with the kind of practiced grace that takes years to learn. I stood just inside the door holding my photo album like a boy holding a book report nobody had asked for, and I watched Vivian lean toward a young assistant with a tablet. "Seat Marcus's father somewhere in the back," she murmured, "near the kitchen. He won't mind." I minded. I said nothing. Marcus found me maybe 5 minutes later, and I want to tell you honestly, my chest still lifted when I saw him, the way it always does. Some old reflex from when he was small, and every step he took toward me was a good thing. He was wearing a suit I didn't recognize, dark navy, tailored close, and he moved through that crowded room like a man who'd practiced the walk. He shook my hand. Not a hug, a handshake, firm, brief, the kind you give a business associate you respect but don't especially miss. "Dad, glad you made it." His eyes were already sliding past my shoulder, scanning the room. "You look," he paused a half second too long, "you look like you're ready for a funeral in that coat." "It's a good coat, Marcus," I said. "Your mother always said." "I brought something for you," I said instead, and held out the photo album. He took it the way you take something unexpected and inconvenient, at the same time, glanced at the leather cover, and said, "Oh, thanks, Dad. I'll look at it later," and tucked it under his arm and turned back toward a cluster of men near the fireplace, men in suits that cost more than my first tow truck, laughing too loud at something none of them actually found funny. I watched him go. I watched him reach that group and physically transform, shoulders back, voice louder, laugh bigger into a man I didn't entirely recognize as my son. A server passed close, a young woman with kind eyes and a tray of water glasses. "Could I trouble you for one of those?" I asked, and she said, "Of course." "Right away, sir," with more real warmth in 4 words than anyone else in that room had shown me in 20 minutes. I found my seat, exactly where Vivian's assistant had put it, back corner, near the swinging kitchen door, the server's traffic lane, and I sat down, my album gone, my coat apparently a punchline, and I told myself the night had barely started. I was right about that. I just didn't know yet how right. I'd been sitting maybe 15 minutes, working the stiffness out of my lower back. I threw it out hauling a wrecked Buick up an embankment in 1996, and it's held a grudge ever since. When I got up to stretch and find a restroom, I stayed close to the wall, out of the flow of the party, and that's how I ended up near a hallway alcove by the coat closet, close enough to hear 2 men in dark suits talking low near the staircase, close enough that they hadn't clocked I was there at all. "Marcus's old man is here tonight," one of them said, the flat, efficient voice of somebody who spends his life in boardrooms. "Yeah," the other one said. Marcus mentioned it. Said his father's putting up capital for the Riverside project. Family investment, he called it. "Really?" The first voice went skeptical, the way experienced money sounds when a number doesn't line up. "I heard the old man was basically out of the picture. Sold his business years ago." "Guess not. Marcus has been dropping his name all week. My father built that company from nothing. My father understands risk. You know how it goes." My stomach dropped 3 inches. I pressed my shoulder against the wall. My son was in that room right now, using my name, my history, my 38 years of never once breaking a promise, as collateral for money I hadn't been asked to give. And then I heard Vivian's voice, closer, around the corner, low and clipped, the voice of someone conducting business she didn't want overheard. "He's here," she was saying into her phone. "Yes, he's being cooperative so far. That's good." A pause. "I need the notary here by 9. Have the paperwork ready. He'll sign tonight." Another pause. Shorter, colder, because he won't make a scene. Old men like him never do. Too proud. A notary. Paperwork. He'll sign tonight. I'd spent 38 years reading the fine print in contracts written by people who didn't want me to understand them, and I understood this immediately. The way you understand a blow is coming half a second before it lands. There was exactly one thing in my name worth a notary showing up on a Saturday night. The salvage yard property on Comanche Street, sold 2 years back, but still holding the deed to the house. My house. Rosa's house. The only asset I had left that meant anything at all. Marcus had mentioned it twice this past year. Once in passing, once more directly, both times wrapped up in talk about expansion and opportunity and helping the family grow. I'd changed the subject both times. I understood now, standing in that alcove with my hand flat against the cold plaster wall, that changing the subject hadn't been the same as saying no clearly enough. I looked down at my own hands, 71 years old, hands that had pulled wrecked cars off embankments in the rain, hands that had held Rosa's face on our wedding day, hands that had signed every honest contract I ever put my name to, and never once signed something I hadn't read twice and understood completely. I walked back to my seat slowly, quietly, my legs steadier under me than I expected. When life has hit you hard enough times, your body learns to absorb the first shock before the second one arrives. Dinner was called around 7. The dining room table sat easily 30. White linen, candles in crystal holders, an arrangement of white roses down the center that Rosa would have admired for exactly 4 seconds before noting that cut roses die faster than people give them credit for. I found my place card at the far end, nearest the kitchen door, and I sat, and I decided, whatever else happened tonight, I was staying through the meal. I owed my son that much patience, even now. The first course had just been poured a chilled corn soup, genuinely good when I noticed Vivian's sister, the bride-to-be, admiring something across the table, and I heard Vivian say, loud enough to carry, "Oh, that's nothing. Wait till you see what Marcus's father brought." She looked at me down the length of that long table with an expression of pure, practiced delight. "Frank, won't you show everyone your little photo album? I'm sure it's just precious." I felt the blood go up into my face. "Marcus," I said quietly. He was 3 seats from her, holding his wine glass, not meeting my eyes. "Vivian," he started. "Oh, don't be modest, Frank," Vivian said, and she reached over, took the album from where Marcus had set it on a side table and opened it in front of the whole room. "There's Marcus with a rusty old car," she announced to her guests, holding up the page with the Nova on it. "My son at 16, grease on his hands, grinning wider than I'd seen him grin in years. And here's," oh, she flipped a page, feigned a small laugh. "Here's what looks like a tow truck. How sweet. Family business." Someone laughed, a short sound quickly swallowed. "But I heard it the way you hear a crack forming under ice." "That's a photo of the business I built," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. 38 years. Fed this family for 3 decades on that business. "Of course it did," Vivian said. And there was something in her voice now, pleasant on the surface, sharp underneath, like a blade wrapped in silk. "We just don't want to bore everyone with the," she paused, searching for the word with obvious relish, "the blue-collar details on a night like tonight." She closed the album with 2 fingers and set it down at the far edge of the table, not handed back to me, just set down. The way you'd set down something you weren't sure was clean. My throat tightened so fast it hurt. I looked at that album, at 30 years of my son's life sitting closed on a stranger's tablecloth, and I thought about the 2 nights I'd spent in the garage pulling those photographs out of boxes, and I made myself breathe, one breath, then another. An old trick, the only dignified thing left to do in a room like that being stillness. I want to tell you, if you've made it this far with me tonight, drop your age in the comments right now. Mine is 71. That's how long it took me to understand what real respect looks like, and how long it took me to sit in a room and watch people who'd forgotten entirely. Let me know you're still with me, because it's about to get a great deal worse before it gets better. The dinner rolled forward the way expensive dinners do after something ugly has happened and everyone's decided, collectively, not to look at it directly. Wine poured a little too fast. Conversation a little too bright. I ate my soup. It had gone lukewarm, but I ate it, because wasting food never sat right with me. Not since the years when wasting food wasn't a choice I could afford to make. Then Vivian stood. She didn't raise her voice. She never needed to. She had the particular gift of a woman who commands a room through precision rather than volume. "I want to make sure everyone's comfortable tonight," she said, her smile sweeping the table like a searchlight. "We've made a few special accommodations for some of our guests." She turned toward the kitchen and nodded once. A server appeared carrying a takeout container, styrofoam, the cheap kind from a gas station deli. He walked the length of the table and set it down in front of me. My name was written on the lid in black marker. Frank. Block letters. Deliberate. The table went quiet in that particular way that means everyone noticed, and no one will say so. "We know you like things simple, Frank," Vivian said, addressing the room with a small, confidential laugh. "My father-in-law is very old-fashioned that way. Doesn't need anything fancy. Isn't that right?" I had never said that. Not once in 71 years. My chest burned like I'd swallowed a hot coal. I kept my hands flat on the tablecloth. "That's very thoughtful," I said, my voice level. "We try," she said, tilting her head, the smile sharpening. Then, louder, to the table. "You know, some people work very hard to get where they are. We all make our own choices about how we live, don't we?" She looked back at me, warm as a January window. "Some people choose comfort, and some people choose thrift." The word landed exactly the way she wanted it to. Not a compliment. An older man, 2 seats down, silver-haired, hands that had clearly worked outdoors once shifted in his chair, jaw tight, opened his mouth, and closed it again. The calculation of a man who's decided speaking up will cost him something he's not ready to spend. I understood that calculation. I'd made it myself, 1,000 times, in 1,000 rooms. "Thrift's a virtue," I said, pleasant as I could manage. My wife always thought so. Something flickered across Vivian's face. Quick, almost nothing, the annoyance of a script going slightly off, and then it smoothed right back over. "Of course it is," she said. "Shall we move to the main course?" I didn't open the container. I pushed it 2 inches to the left, out of the space directly in front of me, and picked up my fork, because whatever Vivian had arranged, the staff had still set my place properly. And that small, honest professionalism from someone doing their job right felt, in that moment, like the kindest thing in the entire house. The young server from earlier passed close, refilling my water without being asked, her eyes carefully forward, her hand I noticed resting for just a second, gentle, on the back of my chair as she moved past. Nobody else in that room touched me with anything but contempt that whole evening, and I have thought about that small kindness more times than I can count since. Marcus, at the head of the table, was telling a story about a development deal in Dallas that had apparently doubled in value. His hands moved as he talked, big and confident. His eyes never came down to my end of the table, not once. My son was 14 feet away, and as far from me as the far side of the moon. It was maybe 20 minutes later, over the main course, when it happened. I've turned this moment over so many times since that I can still feel the exact weight of it. Vivian was standing near my end of the table, a serving platter of glazed carrots in her hands, leaning across to serve the older gentleman beside me, her phone propped against a candlestick, camera angled. I understand now, directly at me. She tipped the platter. Warm sauce and carrots slid straight off the edge and down the front of my good coat, my 30-year-old charcoal wool pooling in my lap. The shock of it hit me like a slap, warm, sudden, humiliating in a way that has nothing to do with pain and everything to do with dignity. "Oh, no," Vivian said, pitched loud, theatrical, exactly the volume that reads well on a phone screen. "Frank, I'm so sorry you moved right as I was reaching, didn't you? Were you leaning?" "I was not leaning," I said, my voice coming out sharp and clear, and I was glad of it. "The poor thing," she said to the table, hand pressed to her chest. "He's had a lot of stimulation tonight, haven't you, Frank? A little confused, maybe? Confused?" That word hit harder than the sauce had. I looked around that table, 30 faces, finding sudden fascination with their plates, and I understood, with sauce cooling on my chest and my heart hammering against my ribs, exactly what I was looking at. She wasn't humiliating me for pleasure, though I believe she took some. She was building a record, a phone camera running the whole time. An old man, sauce on his coat, confused, a little unsteady. The kind of footage that supports a very particular kind of legal argument to a very particular kind of judge, if a person wanted to argue that an old man could no longer manage his own affairs or his own property. "I'm not confused," I said, loud enough for the whole table. My voice, the one I'd used for 38 years telling insurance men exactly what I meant and not one word more. I did not move. That platter was tipped on purpose, and that phone has been recording the entire time. The room went absolutely still. Vivian's smile stayed fixed, but something behind her eyes recalculated. Fast. Cold. Marcus stood up. My heart lifted, one foolish half-second, the old reflex, and then he walked the length of the table, looked down at the stain spreading across my coat, and his jaw worked like he was chewing something he couldn't swallow. "Dad," he said, quiet, "you should go." "I need to go," I repeated. He glanced back at Vivian. "You're making tonight difficult, Dad. Your wife just poured food on me on camera, on purpose," I said. "You know she did." Something crossed his face, fast and painful, the look of a man who knows exactly what's true and has decided the truth costs too much tonight. He reached into his jacket, pulled out his wallet, and dropped a small fold of bills onto the tablecloth in front of me, right into the wet ring left by my water glass. "Take a cab home, Dad," he said, his voice gone flat. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." 71 years old, sauce cooling on my chest, crumpled bills scattered in front of me like I was a man being moved along from a street corner. My eyes burned so hot I had to look up at the chandelier and blink hard, absolutely determined not to let this room see me cry. And then Marcus reached into his jacket a second time and set a folded document on the table beside the money, smoothing it flat with one hand. I saw the header before he said a single word. "Property Transfer Agreement. Comanche Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma. My house. We need your signature tonight," Marcus said. "It's just collateral, Dad, for the Riverside financing. It's straightforward. You want me to sign over the house your mother died in," I said. And each word came out separate, deliberate, like nails set one at a time. His face flinched, the first real thing I'd seen cross it all night, grief, fast and bright, before it closed back over like water settling above a stone. "Sign it tonight," he said, voice rough at the edges now. "Or don't. But if you don't, I don't know what we are to each other anymore." My hand actually moved toward that pen, some old reflex. The father's reflex. The one that says, "Give him what he needs. You can absorb it. You always have." And that's when I heard it. Not the kitchen door, the front door, opening, and footsteps coming through the entry hall with an unhurried certainty that made every hair on my arms stand up, because I have spent enough years in rooms full of important people to know exactly what it sounds like when someone genuinely important walks into one. The dining room turned toward the sound the way a field of grass turns when the wind shifts, first the guests near the hallway, then the ones further in, conversations dying mid-sentence, wine glasses pausing halfway to open mouths. A man stood in the doorway, 58, maybe 60, broad through the shoulders, silver at the temples, wearing a charcoal suit with the top button open, standing the way certain men stand in doorways, like the frame had been built to fit him. Beside him, an older woman in a wheelchair, a blanket across her lap, silver hair pinned back neatly. I recognized him before I could even fully process why. Warren Castellano. I hadn't laid eyes on him in 11 years. He was the most powerful man in that room by a distance, and I watched my son's whole body reconfigure in under 2 seconds, confrontation sliding off him like water, replaced by the practiced warmth of a man greeting the biggest investor of his career. Mr. Castellano, Marcus said, hand extended, voice climbing into its most polished register. We're honored. Let me show you two. In a moment, Warren said, unhurried, conversational, a man with nothing to prove. His eyes moved across that room with quiet, methodical attention, not a guest taking in a party. A man looking for something specific, and then they found me. I felt it land, the way you feel weather change before you see the clouds. He took in the sauce on my coat, the scattered bills, the document under my hand, and his face didn't change dramatically. No gasp, no performance. Something simply went very still and very cold behind his eyes. Excuse me, he said to my son, and walked past him. He walked the full length of that dining room, 30 guests tracking him in collective confusion, because this was not how Warren Castellano was supposed to behave at a party thrown to court him. He stopped in front of me. Frank, he said. Quiet. Just my name. The way you'd retrieve something you'd kept carefully in a safe place for a long time. My throat closed up entirely. Warren, I managed. Didn't expect to see you tonight. I know you didn't, he said. He pulled out the chair beside me, not across, not a comfortable social distance, right beside me, and sat down. I heard about the party. I wanted to see you. From the head of the table, Vivian's voice arrived, sharper than she intended. Mr. Castellano, we have a seat prepared for you at the— I'm comfortable here, he said, not raising his voice, not even looking at her, his eyes staying on me. He glanced down at the document under my hand. Don't sign that, he said, low and direct. I have some things to say to this room. I should have said them a long time ago. I'd like your permission to say them now. I looked at this man who had walked past 60 guests and his own hostess to sit beside a stained old man at the far end of a table. Say what you need to say, I told him. He stood, straightened his jacket, and turned to face the room. And the room came to attention the way rooms do for certain people, not out of fear, but out of the instinct that something true is about to be spoken. My name is Warren Castellano, he said. Some of you know me. I run Castellano Freight and Logistics, operating in 19 states, just over 5,000 employees. I'm not here tonight because Marcus Delgado invited me. He gestured toward me, unhurried, unambiguous. I'm here because this man is someone I owe a debt no amount of money has ever fully covered. Marcus made a sound that wasn't quite a word. 11 years ago, Warren said, I was 39 years old, and my company was 6 weeks from collapse. My daughter Sophie had just been diagnosed with a rare kidney condition, and every specialist who could help her was 2 states away, and my insurance had already denied the transplant evaluation twice. Every bank in this city told me no. I had no collateral left to offer anyone. I was out of road. He paused. The room didn't breathe. I went to see a man named Frank Delgado, he said, not because we were close, because a mutual acquaintance told me he was a man who kept his word. And at that point in my life, a man who kept his word was the single most valuable thing I could imagine existing. I told him everything. I didn't have the luxury of pride left. He listened. He asked me 2 questions, and then he told me to come back the next morning. He looked at me then, and I felt the weight of it settle across the whole table. Frank, he said, do you want to tell them what you did, or should I? You tell it better than I would, I said. my voice steadier than I had any right to expect. The next morning, Warren said, turning back to the room, Frank Delgado put up the deed to his own property as collateral against a loan that saved my company and, 6 weeks later, paid for the transplant evaluation that saved my daughter's life. He asked for nothing back. No equity. No interest above what the bank required. Nothing but my word. He staked everything he and his late wife had built on a stranger, because he believed the man was worth the risk. He let that settle, and then his voice dropped, very quiet. That property, he said, is the same property sitting on this table tonight, in a document asking him to sign it away. Something happened to the air in that room. I felt it physically. The pressure changed before a storm. 30 people recalculating everything they thought they'd understood about the evening, about the old man in the stained coat, about the family that had put him there. Warren wasn't finished. He turned and looked directly at Vivian, and his voice, still not raised, went harder than anything I'd heard from him all night. I've been in business 30 years, he said. I know what a staged accident looks like on camera. I know what a notary on a Saturday looks like when nobody was told about it in advance. And I know exactly what kind of paperwork gets prepared for a man who's been made to look confused in front of witnesses all evening. He turned back to me. Frank, whatever's in that folder, don't sign a word of it tonight. Call your lawyer Monday morning. I'll sit with you while you do it, if you want the company. Vivian's face had gone the color of the tablecloth. Marcus stood frozen, the folded document still under his own hand, staring at his father like he was seeing him, really seeing him for the first time in years. Then, without another word, Warren reached up, unbuttoned his own suit jacket, shrugged it off, and folded it over his arm. He picked up a linen napkin from the table, crouched down beside my chair, and began, carefully, methodically, to blot the sauce from my coat. Warren, my voice came out rough. You don't have to. Let me do this, Frank, he said, so quiet it was meant only for me. 30 guests, executives, investors, the whole polished architecture of that room, watched a man worth more than everyone else at that table combined, kneel beside a stained old man in a bad chair, and clean his coat like it was the most natural thing in the world. My throat closed entirely. My hands trembled in my lap. Not from cold, not from age, but from the specific, devastating experience of being treated with dignity after 2 solid hours of the opposite. I want to say something to whoever's still listening tonight, because I think some of you know this feeling. There is nothing that undoes you faster than kindness arriving after cruelty. You can survive the cruelty. It's the kindness that breaks you open. Marcus finally moved. He crossed the room slowly, and for the first time all night, he wasn't performing for anyone. He looked at the sauce on my coat, at Warren crouched beside my chair, at his own wife standing frozen at the head of the table, with a phone still glowing on the tablecloth in front of her, and something in his face collapsed, all the polish gone at once. Dad, he said, and it cracked in the middle. I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know about the notary, I didn't. You knew about the money you asked me to sign over? I said, quiet, not cruel, just true. You knew about the cab fare and the container with my name on it. Some of this you knew, Marcus. He didn't argue. That, more than anything, told me how far gone the evening already was for him. I won't walk you through every hour of what happened after that, because most of it you can imagine, and some of it belongs to my family alone now. What I'll tell you is this. Vivian tried, in the days that followed, to spin the story a private family matter, she called it, blown out of proportion by people who didn't understand the context. But 3 separate guests who'd been in that dining room posted their own footage within a week, and there is very little spin that survives 30 independent witnesses. Her name came off 2 charity boards within the month. The dinners stopped, the calls she used to get from the women she'd hosted, the ones who'd laughed at her jokes and admired her flower arrangements, those calls stopped too. I want to be honest with you, I took no pleasure in that. What happened to Vivian was simply the weight of what Vivian had done, arriving the way weight always eventually does. Marcus called me twice that December. The first time, I let it go to voicemail, not out of anger. I'd moved past anger into something quieter and more durable than that, but because I wasn't ready yet, and at 71 I've learned that readiness matters more than speed. The second time, I picked up. Dad, he said, I don't know what to say. I've been trying for 3 weeks and I don't have anything. Then don't say anything, I told him. Just listen a minute. I told him I'd found something going through the garage, a shoebox of his mother's, letters she'd written and never sent, mostly to him, from the years he was in high school and pulling away from both of us the way boys do. I'm going to mail them to you, I said. I'm not going to tell you what's in them. You're going to read them yourself, and when you're done, you'll understand some things I never found the right words to tell you. He was quiet a long moment. Are you angry at me? He finally asked, and the question came out so stripped down, so honest, that it caught me off guard. No, I told him, and meant it. I'm tired, son, and I'm sad. But I'm not angry. Anger takes energy I'd rather spend on something that grows. I mailed the letters 3 days later. He called the night they arrived and could barely get a full sentence out. Mom, he finally managed just the word, handed back to me across a phone line like something too heavy to carry alone. I know, I said. Get some sleep, son. A year is a long time. Long enough for a marriage to come apart at the seams the way Marcus and Vivian's eventually did, quietly, without spectacle, the way most true endings actually happen. Long enough for a man to learn, slowly and with real pain, exactly what he's made of underneath all the polish he'd bought himself. Long enough, maybe, for something broken to start finding a new shape. Last Thanksgiving, I helped run the dinner at the community center on 11th Street here in Tulsa, the way I've done for years now. Folding tables, paper cutout leaves taped to the windows, turkey and cornbread instead of catered corn soup. Warren and his daughter Sophie came, the way they do every year now. Sophie's 22, healthy, studying to be a nurse, and she hugs me every single time like I hung the moon, which embarrasses me and means more than I could ever say. Around 5 o'clock, I looked up from the serving line and Marcus was standing in the doorway. Jeans, an old flannel shirt, hair damp from the cold outside. He'd lost some weight over the year, and what was left of him looked less polished and more honest, if that makes any sense at all. He was already wearing an apron, tied before he even walked in, the way a man does when he wants to make clear he isn't arriving as a guest. I didn't know if I should come, he said. Quiet. Meant only for me. But you did, I said. Yeah, he said. I did. Go find Dolores at the serving table, I told him. She'll put you to work. He nodded and walked in and picked up a ladle and started filling bowls, and I watched him for a minute before I turned back to my own line. Later that night, out on the sidewalk, cold air biting at my face, I took the folded photo album out of my coat pocket. I'd gotten it back, eventually, from a box of things at Marcus's old house, and I held it in both hands for a while. We had a good night, Rosa, I said out loud. 60 people. Real food. Marcus came. I don't know yet what he's going to become, but he came. That's something. I've told you this the way it happened to me, and now that it's told, I want to leave you with a few things that belong to me alone. The first is this. I don't believe God wastes pain. He didn't waste mine. That night in that dining room was one of the worst nights of my life, and it became one of the truest, and I wouldn't trade it now. Not for anything. The second thing is harder to say. Don't love your children by clearing every consequence out of their path the way I did for years. I called it love. Half the time it was fear. Fear of being needed less. Fear of the distance honesty creates between a father and a son. Real love tells the truth even when the truth costs you something. And the third thing, for whatever it's worth from a man who's 71 and has buried the only woman he ever loved, family justice was never something a courtroom could hand me. It's something you build, slow, quiet, year by year, by refusing to become what was done to you. That's the only kind that ever lasts. If tonight's story moved something loose in you, if it reminded you of somebody you love, or somebody you lost, or something you've been putting off saying out loud, tell me about it in the comments. Tell me your story. And if you haven't yet, this is your sign to subscribe, because there's more where this came from, and I'd be glad to have you here for it. Thank you for staying with me till the very end. It means more than you know.